Hello everybody, it is I, the Obscurist Tourist, once again, and just look at this out here. It is a beautiful sunny day. Warm weather is back, and it's fitting because it is the official first day of spring, or as I like to call it, leather weather season. So I got a pretty cool treat for all of you horror movie fans, and especially zombie movie buffs, because I am standing here right in front of none other than the Toronto Necropolis. This graveyard was, I guess the first burials began in 1850, and it's home to many prominent politicians and early settlers of Toronto. Not only that, it is also the final resting place of the godfather of the dead himself, George A. Romero. So, let's step inside and pay homage to a true master and innovator of horror, George A. Romero. Now, some of you might be wondering why George A. Romero, a man who was born in the Bronx in New York City, is buried in Toronto, while a lot of his colleagues shuffled off to New York City or Los Angeles. Romero instead chose to go north, and north was Toronto. What a pretty cool place to settle down, I'd have to say. George A. Romero moved to Toronto in 2004 and actually became a Canadian citizen in 2009. And he actually did a fair bit of his later work around the city, including filming Diary of the Dead in Markham, just north of Toronto. He was also a regular throughout the years at Toronto's Fan Expo. And now I said that a lot of historical figures and prominent Toronto political figures are buried here in the necropolis. And who could be more prominent than this man, William Lyon Mackenzie? He was a member of Canada's Parliament from 1828 to 1834, and again later on. He was the first mayor of Toronto in 1834 and became the leader of the 1837 rebellion. William Lyon Mackenzie. Let's give you a little bit of a biography on George A. Romero, because if you're unfamiliar with his works, and I'd be ashamed and surprised to know that you weren't familiar with his works, but George A. Romero is considered to be the father of the modern zombie film genre, the godfather of the dead, if you will. Now, his first major break came in 1968 when he co-wrote and directed the cult classic, Night of the Living Dead. The film was revolutionary to the horror genre, completely reshaping the previous image of zombies as being persons enslaved by voodoo magic. Instead, Romero's reimagined zombies were reanimated corpses hungering for the flesh of the living. It was a groundbreaking vision, and to this day, it has been a trope that has been used in almost every zombie film. Pretty cool. Romero attempted to branch out from the zombie genre in 1971 with a romantic comedy of all things titled There's Always Vanilla. That and other films around that period were commercial flops, so he returned to his roots and made Dawn of the Dead in 1978. And I have to say that Dawn of the Dead is one of my favorite horror movies of all time, right behind The Thing. So maybe The Thing and Dawn of the Dead. There's just something visceral about the Dawn of the Dead that gets me going. It is a perfect film, and it is a perfect summation of human nature, returning to the mall and all that. Anyway, very cool, and if you haven't seen it, I highly suggest you see Dawn of the Dead, the original, the 1978 version, though the 2004 remake is not bad as well. In 1982, Romero collaborated with famed horror author Stephen King to direct Creepshow. Side note, another one of my favorites. What can I say? I'm a sucker for all of those horror films that I saw in the early 1980s. As the 1980s came to a close, his volume of work began to diminish, but in 1987, he again collaborated with King on the sequel, Creepshow 2, What Else?, for which he provided the script. Romero ultimately finished his Dead series with 2007's Diary of the Dead and 2009's Survival of the Dead. It is interesting to note here that after spending much of my life in Toronto, I have never actually visited the Necropolis, so this is quite a treat for me. I absolutely adore cemeteries, and I've always been drawn to them and spent much of my youth exploring cemeteries and taking pictures of gravestones. Such a cliche for an emo kid in the 1990s, hanging out in cemeteries, rocking some Doc Martens and a Smiths t-shirt. There is just something very cathartic about being and walking around in a cemetery. They've always provided some sort of comfort, for the lack of a better word, even though when you get down to the brass tacks of it all, they are quite dark and depressing. I really feel like I'm walking around in circles here, which is quite embarrassing because this place isn't actually all that big. I should have stumbled upon George A. Romero's grave at some point, but alas, I am still searching. Now, if you actually come to the Necropolis looking for the grave of George A. Romero, you're going to want to find this section right here, Section P, and it's a little bit hidden off the path, so its location is a little bit kind of a mystery. You got to find it to find the grave, and I'm in the right section, and I'm still having trouble finding the grave, but I know I'm very close. I feel like it's within 10 feet of me, so you can look online, and the map of the entire cemetery is there, but I guess I'm not very good at reading maps because I still haven't found it. But here it is, Section P anyway. Close. Happy Lion. Sleeping Lion. I absolutely love this. I really hope that somebody does something like this for me when I die. Wow, look at this. What an absolutely fitting name to come up in this video today. An absolutely wicked last name that, to be honest, I've never come across in my life. Fear. I feel like you could accomplish pretty much anything in life if your surname was Fear. And here's the grave of another prominent political figure here in Toronto. It's the final resting place for Jack Layton, the beloved leader of the New Democratic Party from 2003 until his death from cancer in 2011. And here it is. Took me long enough, but I finally found it. I have been looking at every single gravestone in the P section, and this just happens to be the very last one. Isn't that always the way? But here it is, the grave of George A. Romero, who is buried alongside his longtime spouse, Suzanne C. de Roche Romero. And right at the foot of George A. Romero's grave and his wife Suzanne, it's a little inscription, and it reads, "Now cracks a noble heart. Good night, sweet prince, and flights of angels sing thee to thy rest." It is surprisingly an unremarkable grave, and I suppose that is the thing that threw me off, because I expected something perhaps, I don't know, a little grander with maybe more fanfare, but I don't know. In some strange way, I appreciate this more. As you can see, somebody drew a little picture of Romero, and from what I can gather, this has been here for a little while, because I've seen some older pictures of this gravesite, and this was here. And someone has even left some cards in memoriam, Zombie Army, Night of the Living Dead card. People loved him, and he certainly made a giant impact on people's lives. I hope that you enjoyed my little glimpse into the life and ultimate death of a true Hollywood icon of horror movies and film in general. George A. Romero, writer, director, producer. And who would have thunk that of all places in the world, he would be buried in a pretty nondescript graveyard here in Toronto. I say nondescript because this place isn't actually very big. If you live in Toronto, you know of the Necropolis, but if you visit here, you would probably never know of its existence. So here's another reason to visit George A. Romero's grave. Rest in peace. Till next time, stay safe and stay beautiful. See you later.